The clink of crystal and the soft murmur of French voices filled La Lumière D'Or like velvet poured into a room. Golden chandeliers glittered above polished marble floors, casting warm halos over linen-draped tables and the wealthy patrons who floated beneath them. It was a Thursday night, the restaurant's most elegant, predictable shift of the week. Except nothing about tonight felt predictable. "Hortense, table 15 wants another bottle of Sancerre," Emily called out, balancing a tray of creme brulee without looking down. "And the man at table 6, he's asking for you again." I glanced up from the row of glasses I was drying, my pulse tightening. "Table 6?" I repeated, though I already knew the answer. Amélie arched an eyebrow, smirking. "Oui, table 6, your favorite. The one who only tips in silence and stares like he's reading your soul." I rolled my eyes, but the heat brushing my cheeks betrayed me. "Livio Pugliesi is not my favorite," I muttered. "He comes every Thursday and requests your section," Amélie countered. She nudged me with her hip. "You could at least enjoy the view." That part, unfortunately, was impossible to deny. Livio never blended in, no matter how dim or crowded the restaurant became. Tonight, he sat beneath one of the smaller chandeliers, the golden light catching the deep brown of his hair and the sharp cut of his jaw. His tailored black suit fit him like it had been sewn onto him personally. Crisp white shirt open at the collar, posture straight, alert, predatory. His eyes were the worst, or the best, part. Cold blue, observant, calculating. The kind of eyes that saw everything, judged everything, and trusted nothing. And yet, for 3 months, he had chosen my section. Every time. "I hate when he does that," I murmured, turning back to the glasses. "Hate." Amélie laughed softly. "Or fear." I didn't answer. Because she wasn't wrong. Livio Pugliesi radiated something heavy, magnetic, dangerous. He moved with the controlled grace of a man who could break another in half without wrinkling his suit. He spoke rarely, smiled sparingly, and every sentence he delivered was dressed in quiet command. A normal man didn't carry an aura like that. An honest man certainly didn't. But I'd learned long ago that fear didn't always announce itself with screams. It whispered, subtle and intimate, threading itself into your ribs until you couldn't tell the difference between danger and fascination. Tonight, though, something else gnawed at me. Something sharper. I had felt it the moment I stepped into the dining room. The energy had shifted. Not in the usual way, not in the flirtatious glances across tables or in the power games disguised as dinner deals. This was different. A colder current beneath the warmth of violin music. My attention drifted, scanning automatically, an old habit that had become instinct. That was when I noticed the first man, table 3, perfect view of Livio. He sat alone, dressed in an expensive charcoal jacket, but the watch on his wrist wasn't just ticking, it was being checked, over and over. Same rhythm, every 30 seconds, eyes never lingering too long, never drawing attention, but always sliding, always toward Livio. I frowned. Then I saw the second. At the bar, where the polished mahogany reflected the amber glow of chandeliers, a man swirled a glass of whiskey like he was performing a ritual. He'd been drinking it for an hour, but his lips never touched the rim. His back was too straight for a relaxed evening. His hand drifted toward the inside of his jacket too often. My stomach tightened. Then the third. Back aisle, near the restrooms. Bent over his phone at first glance, but his thumb never moved. His eyes darted in micro movements. And when he adjusted his jacket, Something beneath the fabric shifted with a weight that wasn't cloth. All three men, all pretending, all watching the same man. My heartbeat began to pulse against my ribs, not with panic, but with certainty. Something is wrong. La Lumière D'Or glittered like a palace, but beneath it, the shadows were deep, and tonight they crawled in coordinated patterns. Hortense? I blinked. Amélie was waving a hand in front of my face. You're somewhere else, she teased lightly. I swallowed and forced a smile. Just thinking. Well, think on your break, she said, grabbing another tray. Your mysterious regular is waiting. My gaze drifted back to Livio. He was watching me. Not in the hungry, desperate way wealthy men sometimes watched the waitresses here, but sharper, analytical, like he sensed the shift too, like he was waiting for me to confirm it. My palms grew damp. He knows, but he doesn't see what I see. I dried my hands, smoothed my apron, and checked my reflection in the stainless steel espresso machine. My hair was in its usual tight bun, not a strand out of place. My posture was immaculate, my expression serene. But my eyes? Amber, alert, sharper than they'd ever been. The clock above the bar read 23:40, 5 minutes until... What? I grabbed the bottle of Amarone Livio always ordered and walked toward table 6. Each step tightened the coil in my chest. The man at table 3 checked his watch again. 23:41. The man at the bar wiped non-existent sweat from his temple. 23:42. The one in the back aisle typed something on his phone with unnatural speed. My throat dried. It's coordinated. It's timed. It's happening now. I reached Livio's table. He looked up, those piercing blue eyes assessing every line of my face. Good evening, Hortense. His voice was smooth, low, threaded with quiet authority that always unsettled me. Your usual? I whispered. He nodded. As I poured his wine, I leaned in closer, too close for etiquette, close enough that from any distance it looked like I was flirting or whispering a menu detail. His jaw tensed. Hortense? He murmured. I inhaled. My lips nearly brushed his ear. Stay quiet, I whispered, barely breathing the words. And don't move. A flicker of something, shock, calculation, danger, lit his eyes. There are men positioned around the room, I continued under my breath. 3 of them, watching you, waiting. Livio didn't speak, didn't blink. He only tilted his head the smallest degree, as though adjusting his seat. Then, casually, invisibly, he tapped his phone once. My breath hitched. Because that was all it took. One tap. That was the signal. From the shadows near the service corridor, 2 silhouettes shifted. Another near the bar leaned forward, and the maitre d', who I had always assumed was just exceptionally snobbish, suddenly adjusted his cufflink in a way that didn't look like fashion at all. Oh God, he has men everywhere. Livio's gaze locked onto mine. You did well, he said softly, dangerously, before I could process it, before I could breathe, before I could even step back. A chair scraped. A glass shattered against the marble. Someone screamed, and the world I had known for 24 quiet, careful years fractured like crystal under pressure. Because Livio's men were rising, and the attack had begun. Subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow's story unfolds darker, deeper, and far more dangerous than you think. Now, let's begin the tale. The moment I straightened from Livio's shoulder, the air in La Lumière D'Or changed. It was subtle at first, like the room drawing in a breath it didn't plan on releasing. The violins in the corner played the same soft waltz. The crystal chandeliers still shimmered. Couples still leaned over candlelit tables, but under it all, something tightened. Livio's phone, lying face down beside his plate, buzzed once. He didn't look at it. He didn't even glance in the direction of the 3 men I'd just described. He just lifted his glass, took a slow sip of red wine as if I hadn't whispered someone is here to betray you into his ear 30 seconds ago. Merci, Hortense, he murmured, voice smooth, almost bored. You may clear the amuse-bouche. I had no idea what the proper response was after telling a man someone wanted him dead, so I did the only thing I knew how to do, my job. I slipped the empty plates from his table, hands steady because years of service had trained them to be. Even as my heart hammered so hard, I felt it in my throat. As I turned toward the kitchen, I saw them. Not the men at table 3, the bar, or the back aisle. Those I'd already cataloged and labeled danger in my mind. No, these were others. A man in a dark suit I'd never seen before rose from a corner banquette, unbuttoning his jacket in a single fluid motion. Another, who'd been dining alone near the entrance since 8 o'clock, set down his fork with exaggerated care and wiped his mouth, as if etiquette mattered in the next few minutes. A third, who I'd assumed was a foreign businessman on a late call in the corridor, slipped his phone into his pocket and walked back into the dining room with eyes that suddenly seemed too sharp, too clear. They moved like shadows, choosing to be visible. They moved for Livio. I froze halfway between his table and the service station, my tray of plates hovering inches above the white tablecloth of table 6. Madame Delacroix frowned up at me, about to complain that I was dripping sauce near her designer clutch. But whatever she saw in my face made her mouth snap shut. The man at table 3 checked his watch one last time. 23:45. Maintenance, he mouthed. It happened all at once. The fake drunk at the bar straightened, glass shattering as his elbow knocked it aside. His hand dove for the inside of his jacket. At the same instant, the man in the back aisle pushed away from his chair, eyes locked on Livio's back, right arm already lifting. A gun. Oh God, that's a gun. Baissez-vous, someone roared. Get down. Time shattered. One of the dark-suited shadows reached the bar in 3 long strides, slamming the drunk face first onto the polished wood. A shot went off, too loud, too close, blowing apart a row of expensive bottles instead of a human chest. Guests screamed. Glass exploded. The violinist's bow screeched across strings in a horrible dying sound before cutting off completely. The man in the aisle didn't make it past his second step. The businessman from the corner caught him at the knee with a brutal, downward kick that folded his leg the wrong way. As he fell, the newcomer twisted his wrist, wrenching the gun from his hand so cleanly it looked choreographed. The weapon slid across the marble floor, stopping against the heel of my shoe. I stared at it, stupidly, like it was a dropped fork. Hortense! A hand seized the back of my black waistcoat, jerking me sideways. Plates flew from my tray, crashing to the floor in a spray of porcelain and sauce. I slammed into a solid chest that smelled of clean soap and gun oil. An arm like iron wrapped around my waist, pivoting me behind one of the tall marble columns that lined the dining room. Eyes down! The man snapped in French. Hands on your head! Do not move! My brain finally caught up with my body. These weren't random men. They were Livio's. He'd had them here all along, scattered through the dining room like regular customers, invisible until the second he decided he needed them. A second gunshot cracked the air, followed by a third. Someone screamed, a high, animal sound. Glass rained down somewhere near the windows. I heard the heavy thud of a body hitting the floor, The crash of toppled chairs, the frantic sobbing of someone praying in Italian. I pressed my palms to the top of my head and forced myself to breathe. My knees wanted to give out, but the arm across my stomach refused to let me fall. My tables, I stammered. My guests, they're safer than you are, the man said. His French carried a faint southern lilt. You stay exactly here until he says otherwise. There was only one he that mattered in this room. I couldn't see Livio clearly from behind the column, but I caught flashes. The sharp cut of his jaw as he turned, scanning the chaos. The way he remained seated for several long seconds while the rest of the restaurant dissolved into panic, as if violence in white linen rooms was something that happened to other people, not him. Then he stood. He did it slowly, deliberately, placing his napkin on the table with the same care he'd used earlier when unfolding it. All around him, his men were already in motion, disarming, striking, pinning struggling bodies to the marble with surgically precise violence. The 3 would-be assassins were on the ground within moments. The fake drunk at the bar lay sprawled across broken glass, his cheek pressed against the wood, one arm twisted high behind his back. Blood trickled from a cut above his ear. The man from the back aisle hissed in Italian, his nose streaming red where a fist had broken it. The watch checker at table 3 knelt with both hands behind his head, face blank, a gun lying useless several meters away. It had been less than a minute since I'd whispered in Livio's ear. A minute, and the elegant dining room of La Lumière D'Or had turned into a war zone. Mon Dieu, someone whispered behind me. It was Margot, the hostess, her usually perfect chignon-hanging crooked dark eyes wide with shock. She clutched the reservation book to her chest like it was a shield. What do we do? She breathed. Stay down, my guard repeated. You don't move until we say. He wasn't shouting. None of them were. Livio's men moved with quiet, terrifying efficiency, voices low and controlled even as they stepped over broken glass and trembling customers. One of them, tall shaved head, expression like carved stone, swept the room, barking orders in rapid Italian that I didn't understand, but instinctively knew meant secure him, check that door, block that exit. The chandelier nearest the bar swung wildly from the shock of the initial gunshot, crystals chiming together in a bright, insane sound that didn't match the terror layered underneath. Everyone remain calm, the shaved-head man said in French now, voice carrying with the weight of command. You are safe. The police have been notified about a disturbance outside the building. It was a lie. I knew it the same way I knew when a customer was about to complain or when a couple was fighting under their smiles. No one in Livio's world called the police, but the lie worked. It gave the diners something to cling to. They huddled around their tables, whispering, staring, clutching their glasses like talismans as the staff tried to herd them away from the worst of the broken glass. Let me see her, a new voice said. Low, calm, unmistakable. The arm around my waist loosened. I turned, heart lodging somewhere in my throat. Livio Pugliesi stood on the other side of the column, only a few feet away. Up close, with the room half destroyed around him, he looked even more dangerous than he had under the soft dining lights. A shard of glass glittered at the edge of his dark hair. There was a small cut along his cheekbone, a thin line of red against his tan skin, as if some flying debris had dared to touch him and barely survived the attempt. He didn't seem to notice. Those cold green eyes swept over me in a single clinical pass. Shoes, apron, hands, throat, face, checking for blood, for wounds, for anything out of place. My breath snared as his gaze locked with mine. "You're not hurt," he said. It wasn't a question. "No," I whispered, though my pulse felt like a bruise. No." He stepped closer. The man who'd held me, broad-shouldered, dark hair, the ghost of stubble along his jaw, released me fully now, taking a respectful half-step back. "She's the one," he told Livio in Italian. "The girl who warned you." I wanted to correct him. Woman, not girl. But the words died on my tongue. Livio's attention never left my face. The marble, the broken glass, the moaning would-be killers on the floor, all of it disappeared under the weight of that stare. "Come." He held out his hand, palm up, his expression unreadable. "We talk in private." Every sensible instinct I had screamed that taking his hand was a terrible idea, that I should stay near other people, near witnesses, near noises that didn't sound like gunshots, that whatever waited in private with a man like this would be worse than anything I'd already seen. But another part of me, the stubborn, curious streak that had made me dangerous since childhood, wanted answers. I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, firm and warm and absolutely certain. He didn't tug or yank. He simply turned and walked, and my body followed because there was no version of this evening now that didn't involve Livio Pugliesi. We passed the bar. The fake drunk glared at us through swelling eyes, his cheek cut and bloody. One of Livio's men pressed a gun to the base of his skull in a silent promise. The others were being similarly restrained, wrists bound with zip ties that someone had conjured out of nowhere. "Cover this," Livio murmured as we reached the service corridor. The shaved head man nodded once. I caught a last glimpse of Margot's pale face, of Thierry the sommelier clutching a shattered bottle like a stranger, of customers already pulling out their phones, hands shaking as they pretended none of this touched them. Then the kitchen doors swung closed, and the chaos softened into muffled noise. The stainless steel world of the back of house was in even worse shape than the dining room. A dropped tray had scattered oysters across the floor, and someone had knocked an entire pan of chocolate sauce onto the tiles. The line cooks huddled near the exit, eyes huge, knives abandoned on cutting boards. Livio didn't slow down. He led me through the prep area, past the walk-in fridge, to the tiny office at the back where the manager usually hid to argue with suppliers. It felt absurdly small when he closed the door behind us. Silence dropped like a curtain. For a few seconds, all I could hear was the roar of my own blood in my ears. Then Livio spoke. "Tell me exactly what you saw." I swallowed. Out there?" "Brilliant, Hortense. Where else?" He leaned against the desk, crossing his arms over his chest. The movement pulled his white shirt tight across his shoulders, emphasizing the solid muscle beneath. Up close, I could see the subtle tremor in his left hand, the only sign that he'd nearly been killed 5 minutes ago. "Yes," he said. "From the moment you realized something was wrong." I took a breath and forced myself to think the way I did when dealing with difficult customers. Details first, panic later. "The man at table 3, I began. "He came in alone, ordered a steak, but he didn't eat. He kept cutting it into smaller and smaller pieces without lifting any to his mouth. His shoulders were too high. He checked his watch every 6 minutes, always with his left hand, and positioned his chair so he had a clean line of sight to your table." Livio's eyes flickered with a sliver of interest. "The one at the bar," I continued, clinging to the facts. "He pretended to be drunk, but his glass stayed full. His feet were planted too evenly, like he was ready to move. He was watching the mirrors, not the bottles. and he kept adjusting his jacket as if he had something heavy under it. "A weapon," Livio said. "Yes." My throat tightened. The third man sat in the back aisle near the kitchen door, where you usually exit. He never leaned his back against the chair. He kept one hand on his thigh the whole time, like he was anchoring himself. Pre-action anxiety. It's what people do when they're waiting to move. The words spilled out faster now, my instincts taking over. They weren't together. Different orders, different arrival times, no overt contact, but they mirrored each other. When one shifted, the others did too. When the violinist stopped between songs, all three glanced at you within 2 seconds. They were triangulating, creating angles. Silence stretched between us. Finally, Livio pushed off the desk. He stepped closer, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to keep looking at him. "Who taught you to see like that, Hortense?" "No one." I tried to shrug, but my shoulders felt locked. I just notice things. People lie with their mouths. Their bodies don't know how. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It wasn't warm. It was sharp, assessing, like he'd discovered a new tool he hadn't known he needed. "You saved my life," he said simply. I let out a shaky breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I didn't want to watch anyone get shot over dessert. His gaze sharpened. "You think this is about dessert?" "No." I looked down at my hands, at the faint tremor finally betraying me. "I think someone in this city wants you dead badly enough to send 3 professionals into a place with cameras on every wall, and I think they just noticed the waitress who ruined their plan." He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. No longer the smooth, urbane tone he used in the dining room. This was colder, older. The voice of the man whose name made waiters lower theirs and politicians check over their shoulders. "You are correct," he said. "They noticed you the moment you leaned toward me." My stomach lurched. What does that mean?" "It means," Livio replied, "that the men who walked in here tonight will not be the last. And when their employer asks why they failed, they will say a young woman with a neat bun and amber eyes whispered in my ear." He reached into his jacket. For a heartbeat, fear knifed through me. He didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out his phone. He tapped a message with quick, efficient movements, then looked up at me again. "This restaurant will be closed for the next few days," he said. "You will not return home. You will not speak to anyone about what you saw tonight." My mouth went dry. "Excuse me?" "I am not in the habit of repeating myself, Hortense." His gaze hardened. "Those men will come after you next. You know that." "No, I don't," I snapped, panic scraping my composure raw. "I know I warned you. I know I did the right thing. But that doesn't mean I'm—" A knock on the office door cut me off. "Entree," Livio called. The door opened. The shaved head man stood there, tie loosened, shirt flecked with something dark I tried not to identify. "Voitures prêtes," he said. "Car's ready." Livio nodded. "Merci, Luca." Then to me, "You're coming with me." I stared. "No, I have an apartment, a life. My shift, my manager, is already handled." He moved closer again, invading my space with deliberate calm. "Your supervisor believes you are being questioned as a witness tonight and will need several days to recover from the trauma. As for your apartment..." He tilted his head. "Do you truly think anyone loyal to the man who ordered this would hesitate to wait for you in the stairwell?" The image hit hard. Dark figures on the landing outside my tiny 5th-floor flat, boots on cracked tiles, a hand over my mouth before I could scream. A shiver slid down my spine. "This is kidnapping," I whispered. "This is protection," he corrected. The difference depends on whether you walk out of here alive in a week." He extended his hand again. I thought of ignoring it, of bolting past him, past Luca, back into the chaos where at least there were witnesses. But the memory of those guns, of how fast everything had happened, of the way his men had appeared from nowhere, all of it crowded my lungs until breathing hurt. My fingers curled into fists at my sides. Then, slowly, I unclenched them and placed my hand in his. "Très bien," Livio murmured. "Stay close." He led me back through the kitchen, where the cook stared at us like we were ghosts, through the side door and down the service corridor that smelled of detergent and old wine. At the end, an emergency exit stood propped open. Cold Parisian air rushed in, carrying the distant wail of sirens that were, finally, heading our way. A sleek black car waited in the alley, engine purring. Another idled behind it, windows tinted so dark they reflected nothing but the distorted glow of the street lamp. Luca opened the rear door. For one last, reckless second, I looked back at the warm light spilling from La Lumière D'Or, at the shadow of a chandelier in the window, at the life I'd had an hour ago when the most dangerous thing I worried about was a burnt crème brûlée. Then Livio's hand tightened around mine, and I ducked into the car. The door shut with a solid, final sound. As the city blurred past the tinted glass and the restaurant disappeared behind us, one thought cut through the fog in my head. My life had just split in two, before the whisper, and everything that would come after. The world returned in fragments, light, warmth, the faint scent of cedar. My eyelids felt heavy, as though dipped in syrup, and when I finally managed to open them, I jolted upright with a soft gasp. This wasn't my apartment in Montmartre, or the cramped staff dorm above La Lumière D'Or, or anywhere I had ever seen in my life. The bed beneath me was enormous, carved from dark oak. The stone walls were smooth and ancient, the kind wealthy families bragged about restoring. A wide window ran across the far side of the room, revealing rolling hills outside Paris, drenched in early morning gold. Vineyards stretched endlessly, birds gliding over them as though posing for a painting. I wasn't supposed to be here. I didn't choose to be here. I inhaled sharply, then a knock, measured, polite, too controlled to be anything but intentional. Before I could respond, the door opened and a woman stepped inside, tall, severe, dressed in a fitted black suit. Her posture radiated quiet authority. "Good morning, Mademoiselle Larose," she said in a crisp tone. "I'm Alessia. Mr. Pugliesi asked me to assist you." My heart stumbled. Livio Pugliesi, the man I whispered to, the man I saved, the man whose world exploded into violence around us. "Where am I?" I croaked. "On one of Mr. Pugliesi's private properties, outside Paris." "A safe house," I muttered. "You mean a prison?" Alessia didn't blink. "Given last night's events? Yes. You are safest here." I swung my legs over the side of the bed. "I need to go home. I have work. No." Her voice sliced through the air, cold enough to make me flinch. "Your home is compromised. Your workplace is compromised. You are compromised." She left before I could respond, the door shutting with a quiet finality that echoed louder than a slam. Compromised. Because I warned him. Because I cared enough to whisper. My pulse hammered in my ears. 2 guards arrived to escort me downstairs, silent, broad-shouldered shadows dressed in black. I followed reluctantly, my footsteps echoing against marble floors polished to mirror shine. My reflection stared back at me. Messy bun, sleep-creased cheeks, eyes too wide and too angry. They led me into a massive sitting room where Livio stood with his hands in his pockets, staring out at the sprawling vineyards. He turned as I entered, his profile sharp in the morning light. His suit jacket was gone, leaving him in a dark shirt that strained over his shoulders. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked tired. But the exhaustion didn't soften him. If anything, it amplified the power humming beneath his skin. "Hortense," he said quietly. Somehow, the way he said my name felt like a secret. "You drugged me," I snapped, surprising even myself. "Your men carried me like luggage." His jaw ticked. "I didn't drug you. You fainted. Your pulse was unstable. My medic sedated you because you were going into shock." I searched his face for deception, but Livio Pugliesi's face was an unreadable masterpiece. Cold, controlled, lethal. "Take me home," I demanded. He stepped toward me. "I can't. You won't. Both." He stopped just a breath away from me, close enough for me to see the faint bruise blooming along his temple, the aftermath of the ambush I saved him from. "You saved my life," Livio said. "That makes you a liability to the men who want me dead." "I didn't save you for this," I whispered. Something flickered in his gaze. Darkness? Yes. But also something heavier. "No," he agreed softly. "But your warning changed everything." My heart skittered. "Matteo's men believed you were part of my security team," Livio continued. "A plant. A spy. They saw you whisper to me. They saw me react. Now they think you know something." "I don't," I said. "They don't need truth. They need leverage." His voice dropped into a dangerous hush. "And you, Hortense, are leverage." A cold shiver ran down my spine. "How long do you plan to keep me here?" I asked. "Until the threat is contained. That could be weeks, months." He didn't deny it. I sank into the nearest chair, my hands trembling. "So that's it? My life is destroyed because I noticed something? Because I tried to help?" "Your life is not destroyed," he said evenly. "Then what is it now?" He hesitated, a man who never hesitated, choosing his words like sharp knives. "You're under my protection." "Protection," I scoffed. "You mean captivity, Hortense." My name from his lips, soft, warning, impossibly intimate. "If I wanted to imprison you, this house would look very different." "That's supposed to comfort me?" "No." He knelt slightly so his eyes were level with mine. "This is." His voice softened. Not gentle, but honest. "Last night, you saw danger before any of my men did. You read those assassins like you were born to. You saved me before I could save myself." My breath hitched. "And now?" I whispered. His gaze swept over me, my trembling fingers, the fear I couldn't hide, the defiance burning beneath it. "Now," he murmured, "you're the only person in my world I cannot afford to lose." My heart stopped, then lurched painfully. Livio stood. "You'll have clothes, meals, access to the estate, but you cannot leave the grounds. That's not freedom. It's survival." He walked toward the door, then paused. Without turning, he said quietly, "Matteo failed last night. He won't fail twice, and if he cannot kill me," his voice dropped to a chilling whisper, "he will take the woman who whispered in my ear." My stomach twisted painfully. Livio left, his footsteps echoing through the hallway, each one a reminder that my life had been irrevocably tied to his. Fear should have been the only thing I felt. But beneath it, something far more dangerous stirred. Curiosity pull and the terrifying possibility that I no longer wanted to escape. I woke to the unnatural quiet of the countryside estate, a silence so heavy it felt rehearsed. Even the birds outside seemed to understand this was a place where secrets slept beneath polished stone floors. I dressed slowly, every motion dragging through the memory of last night. The ambush, the gunfire, Livio's terrifying command, the way his men had moved like shadows answering to one mind. I still didn't know if Livio had rescued me or abducted me with silk-lined chains. When I stepped into the marble hallway, the 2 guards stationed outside straightened instantly. One opened the door for me, the other shifted like someone important was passing. I wasn't important. I didn't want to be important. But the moment I whispered in Livio's ear, he'd placed an invisible crown on my head. One half of Paris's underworld now wanted it severed. Sophia, Livio's impossibly composed assistant, guided me to the dining terrace. "He's waiting," she said, voice perfectly unreadable. I hesitated at the doorway before stepping into the sunlight. Livio sat at the long outdoor table, dark hair lit gold by the rising sun, jaw shadowed by a night without sleep. He looked less like the untouchable Mafia king I saw at La Lumière D'Or and more like a man haunted by enemies. But when his cold blue eyes met mine, the exhaustion didn't matter. Power radiated off him like heat. "Hortense," he said. The way he said my name, sharp, intimate, made something inside me flinch. I took the seat across from him, though no distance in the world could soften the weight of his gaze. "Did you sleep?" I asked. "No." His fingers tapped the table once, controlled, deadly. Someone inside my circle betrayed me last night. Someone who knew exactly where I'd be. The air left my lungs. "One of your own?" "Someone I trusted." His voice was colder than the stone beneath our feet. "And I do not trust easily." A long silence stretched between us before Livio leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes narrowing with a predator's scrutiny. "Tell me," he murmured. "How did you know?" I swallowed. Their patterns, their breathing, the way their eyes tracked you, it was too coordinated. "Instinct," he said, not a question, but a revelation. "Always," I whispered. "I listen to what people don't say." Livio studied me for a long moment, as if I were a puzzle piece he hadn't expected to need. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "That makes you a liability to my enemies, and an asset to me." I felt my pulse flutter. "Livio, I don't want to be an asset. I want to go home." "You can't." His voice didn't rise. It simply hardened. "The men who came for me will come for you. They think you're mine." "I'm not," I said sharply. His eyes didn't budge. "You are now." Before I could snap back, a knock hit the terrace door. One of his soldiers entered. "Boss, Enzo is here. Says it's urgent." Livio's expression shifted, tightening. "Send him in." Enzo strode onto the terrace. I had seen him before, Livio's lieutenant, always at his right hand, tall, charming, steady as bedrock. But today, something cracked in the air the moment he walked in. Even before he spoke, I saw it. The tension in his jaw, the forced swallow, the way his eyes refused to meet Livio's. Fingers curling and uncurling at his side, his gaze flicking, too fast, toward the exit wrong. Dangerously wrong. Livio rose. "You have something to report?" Enzo nodded too quickly. "I'm sorry, boss. The men who attacked, we still don't know who sent them, but we're searching. Lies, clean lies, practiced lies, but lies." "Livio," I said quietly. Both men turned to me. "Enzo is hiding something." Livio stiffened. Enzo froze. "What?" Livio's voice went soft, soft enough to terrify. I stood slowly. "He won't meet your eyes. His breathing is shallow. He's planning an exit. He knew exactly where you would be last night. Only someone close could have leaked your routine." Enzo's jaw clenched. "Livio, she's a waitress. You're listening to She's the reason I'm alive, Livio." Snapped. The air turned to ice. My chest tightened. I looked Enzo dead in the eye. "It was you." Enzo moved first, going for his jacket. Livio was faster. In a breath, Enzo was slammed against the stone pillar, Livio's forearm crushing his windpipe. "You betrayed me?" Livio growled. Enzo choked, clawing at Livio's arm. "It wasn't supposed to kill you. Matteo promised. We'd take over peacefully. I just had to open the door." Matteo. The name rippled through Livio's body like a detonated wire. "He used you," Livio hissed, "and you were too stupid to see it." One brutal twist, Enzo's body crumpled at Livio's feet. I gasped, hands flying to my mouth, but I couldn't look away. Livio turned toward me, chest rising and falling with controlled violence. "You were right," he said softly. "You killed him," I whispered. "Betrayal is death in my world," he said calmly. "And understand this, he would have delivered you to them." I stepped back. He stepped closer. "Do you regret telling me?" he asked. I wanted to scream yes, but the truth came out trembling. "No." Something inside him softened. Barely, but enough for me to feel the shift. "You see danger before I do," he murmured. "You read people better than any man in my circle." He reached out, not to capture me, but to touch my cheek. My breath caught. "Hortense." His hand brushed my jaw. "You're not just an asset." His voice dropped lower. "You're essential." His world should have pushed me away. Instead, it drew me in, and I wasn't sure I wanted to escape it anymore. The first time Livio allowed me to leave the estate again, the entire room changed, like the walls themselves tightened in warning. "You may return to work," he'd said, sitting behind his massive oak desk, sleeves rolled up, irritation simmering beneath his calm tone. "But you will not walk into that restaurant alone." I crossed my arms. "I'm not your prisoner, Livio." His eyebrow lifted the way it always did when he was about to win an argument. "You are the reason I'm still alive. That makes you a target. So yes, there will be precautions." Precautions. Such an innocent word for the things he had in mind. In practice, it meant 3 suffocating measures: an armored car, a secret security team planted among diners, Livio watching every moment of my shift through silent surveillance feeds. I hated all of it. But I also needed to feel like I still had a life. Something of my own that existed before Livio Pugliesi ripped the floor out from under me. So I went back to La Lumière D'Or. My uniform felt tighter than before. My bun too neat. My amber eyes a little too alert. The chandeliers glowed as beautifully as always. The marble floors shined, and the violinist played the same melodies. But the world behind my eyes had changed. I saw everything differently now. The man at the bar with trembling hands, not drunk, nervous. The couple whispering too quietly, not lovers, watching the door. The waiter I didn't recognize, not new staff, watching me. I breathed through it the way Livio had taught me. Slow, steady, measured. Enzo's execution still haunted me. The way he had begged. The way Livio hadn't flinched. The way that betrayal had cracked something inside him that he hid from everyone but me. And somehow, that made me trust him more. Hours passed with no incident. Closing time arrived. Staff filtered out. Paris exhaled its nighttime chill as I stepped onto the dim street, wrapped in my scarf. The city felt quiet. Too quiet. I didn't hear the first man until I heard the click of a shoe behind me, then another, then the soft whoosh of a van door sliding open. My instincts screamed, "Run!" I sprinted down the sidewalk, but a gloved hand snatched my wrist, yanking me back so hard my shoulder burned. I twisted, kicking his shin, fighting for breath as he pulled me toward the van. Another man lunged from the shadows. "Take her! Now!" I screamed, but a palm clamped down on my mouth. The second man reached for me and froze. A gunshot cracked through the night. He fell. Another shot. Then a heavy grunt somewhere behind the van. Black shapes poured into the alley, silent, lethal. Livio's men. The attacker dragging me let out a curse, pulling harder, but I twisted violently, breaking free right as a bullet tore past us, grazing his shoulder. Then someone stepped into the streetlight, someone I would recognize even in darkness. Livio. His jaw was clenched so tightly a vein pulsed in his neck. His pistol was steady, his eyes oceans of fury. He didn't look human. He looked like a storm, one that erased entire cities. My breath caught. The last assailant tried to run. Livio shot him clean through the thigh. The man collapsed with a scream. "Hortense!" Livio's voice broke, raw, panicked, furious, as he reached me. His hands were everywhere, skimming my arms, shoulders, waist, checking for injuries. "Did they touch you? Did they hurt you?" I shook my head, breath trembling. His chest rose and fell in hard, uneven breaths. Livio Pugliesi was shaken, truly shaken, and that terrified me more than the attack. "Into the car," he ordered. "Now." His guards dragged the injured attackers away while Livio practically carried me to the black sedan. The doors shut, sealing us in a cocoon of leather, gunpowder, and cold night air. I could barely breathe. "They almost took me," I whispered. Livio turned toward me, expression stripped bare, anger, fear, something deeper buried underneath. "They would have done far worse than that," he said quietly. The car vibrated with tension. "If I had arrived 10 seconds later," he continued, voice rough, "they would have vanished with you, and I would have burned this entire city to the ground to find you." My heartbeat thudded painfully. Livio's face hovered, close, too close. His hand lay on the seat between us, fingers flexing like he was fighting the urge to touch me. "Matteo is behind this," he whispered. "He's punishing me for surviving his trap, for killing Enzo, and now, for valuing you." My breath stilled. "Valuing me?" I echoed. He held my gaze, stormy, afraid, intense. "More than I should." The car slowed as we reached the estate. Gates opened. Guards snapped into position. Livio guided me inside with a grip that was both protective and possessive. The foyer felt warm, but Livio's expression was anything but. He cupped my jaw gently, thumb tracing my cheek like he was checking if I was real. "You do not leave this estate again," he said, voice trembling with fury and something far more dangerous. "Not until Matteo is gone, not until this war is finished." His touch burned against my skin. My fear wrapped around me like cold iron, but so did something else. Something that terrified me even more than the attack. I felt safe with him. Too safe. And for the first time, the truth hit me. This wasn't just protection. This was obsession. And I wasn't on the edge of Livio's world anymore. I was already inside it. I never knew silence could have a temperature, cold, metallic, sharp enough to prickle beneath my skin. But that was exactly the kind of silence filling Livio Pugliesi's war room. The safe house basement had been transformed into something between a command center and a battlefield altar. Maps of Paris covered the walls, pinned with calculated precision. Red strings crossed paths like veins. Coded sheets sat beside encrypted devices. And at the center of it all stood Livio. pacing the length of a long walnut table with the quiet, simmering menace of a storm preparing to break. It was close to midnight, but sleep didn't exist down here. His men spoke in clipped Italian and Parisian French, passing updates in low, urgent murmurs. Every few minutes, someone entered with new intel, surveillance captures, intercepted messages. Matteo's name tucked into all of them like poison. I stood on the fringes of the room, arms wrapped around myself. I didn't belong here. I knew that. But Livio had insisted I needed to see the full picture. And apparently the full picture included understanding exactly how I had become part of a Mafia war. "Hortense," Livio said without turning. "Come here." There was something in the way he spoke my name, controlled, steady, but threaded with something unspoken that made the air shift around me. I stepped forward, heart thudding. Livio spread several printed photos across the table, still frames from surveillance footage. "These were taken half an hour apart," he said. "Cafe in Belleville. One Matteo uses as a meeting spot." He tapped the images. "I want your read on their state of mind." I stared at him. "My read?" "Yes." He finally met my eyes. "You see things the rest of us don't." A ripple of interest moved through the room. Nobody mocked me. Nobody dismissed me. They watched. Livio dragged his thumb across the first image, a wiry man leaning against a brick wall. "Him." I leaned closer. "He's scared," I said quietly. "He's trying to look relaxed, but he's folding inward, defensive. And look at his foot, angled toward the exit. He's planning to run, not fight." Livio's lips curled, not into a smile, but recognition. "Correct." I shifted to the second image, a broad man with tight shoulders. "He's loyal," I murmured, "or too stubborn to betray Matteo. His jaw tension isn't fear, it's irritation. He'll fight because he doesn't know how not to." Livio nodded slowly. "And Matteo?" The last image showed Matteo in a dim room, head tilted as if listening. I inhaled sharply. "He thinks you're weakened, not by the ambush, but by me." My throat tightened. "He thinks hurting me will break you." Every sound in the room died. Livio closed the folder with calm precision, but his eyes darkened like deep water. "He is mistaken." "But he believes it," I said softly. Livio looked to his men. "Mark the first as a weak link. Second and third, high retaliation threats." Then he turned to me with a look so intense it sent heat crawling up my spine. "You saw all that instantly." I wanted to deny it, pretend it was luck. But the truth was the truth. "It's instinct," I whispered. "Not talent. I notice things. It's how I survived." Livio studied me gently, far more gently than anyone wearing a crown of violence should ever look at someone like me. "You survived more than you admit." I swallowed, unable to answer. "Sit," he said quietly. "There's more." I obeyed, pulse fluttering. Livio spread out a city blueprint, streets, alleys, underpasses. "This cluster," he said, tapping Belleville. "Matteo's men disappear here before major operations. I want your prediction on their reaction if we press them out." I forced myself to breathe. "If they feel cornered, they'll scatter. Matteo's runner is the first to crack. But his inner circle? They won't flee. They'll try a negotiation facade or an ambush." Livio's jaw tightened. "Then we flush them both ways." His men murmured approval, leaning over maps and routes. I hesitated, then spoke again. "Livio, Matteo isn't just after your power. He's after humiliation. He wants the city to see you losing control." Livio turned sharply. "Is that what you see?" I met his gaze. "No. I see a man everyone is terrified to disappoint." Silence hit the room like a dropped stone. Something in Livio shifted, not softened, but almost cracked. Enough for me to glimpse the man beneath the empire. He stepped closer, voice low. "Hortense." My breath stumbled. "You weren't meant to be part of this world," he said softly. "I know. And yet, you walk into it without flinching." "That's not true," I whispered. "I flinch. Inside. I'm terrified." His hand lifted, a slow, almost hesitant movement, and his fingers brushed my jaw, tilting my face up to his. "Fear isn't weakness," he murmured. "It's awareness. And awareness," his thumb grazed my cheek, "is what keeps people alive." My pulse thundered, but the door flew open. "Boss," Vincent said urgently. "Movement. Matteo's men are repositioning. 2 vans. One headed toward the 11th arrondissement, one toward the river docks." Livio hardened instantly, the tenderness evaporating. "Show me." Vincent projected live footage onto the wall, 2 dark vans weaving through Paris. "He's preparing something," Livio muttered. I stepped closer. "No, he's testing you." Vincent frowned. "Testing?" "He wants to see how fast you deploy, your patterns, your rage." Livio's gaze snapped to mine. "He wants to measure me." "So he can weaponize it." Livio breathed out, cold and sharp. "Then we give him nothing." He turned to his men. "Reverse routes, keep distance. No engagement unless fired upon." They scattered immediately. The room emptied until only Livio and I remained. He turned to me, stepping closer. "Since the night you whispered in my ear, Hortense, I haven't been able to see this war without seeing you in the center of it." My breath hitched. "Livio, I don't know if it's destiny," he murmured, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear, "or the most dangerous mistake I'm willing to burn this city for." His words wrapped around me like smoke, dangerous, intimate. But before I could respond, the monitors erupted. Matteo appeared on one of the live feeds. Livio straightened, eyes burning with war. "It's time," he said. He extended his hand. I took it, and together we walked toward the shadows waiting for us. The rain started sometime after midnight, soft taps at first, then growing heavier until it sounded like thousands of fingertips drumming against the tall windows of Livio's estate. I sat curled near the fireplace, the warmth flickering across my skin, but it did nothing to quiet the thoughts racing through me. Matteo will not stop. You are the leverage he wants. Livio's voice from earlier kept replaying in my mind. I hated how true it felt, how small and exposed I suddenly was in the middle of a war I never meant to enter. Downstairs, I could hear the distant echo of voices, Livio strategizing with his men, issuing commands sharp enough to cut through the thick stone walls. Footsteps moved with purpose. Doors opened, closed. The mansion felt like a fortress around me, yet I had never felt more vulnerable. A gentle knock came at my door. Before I could tell whoever it was to wait, the door opened and Livio stepped inside. He wore a dark shirt, sleeves rolled back, the collar slightly undone like he'd run his hands through it one too many times. His hair was mussed, his eyes shadowed. He looked powerful, exhausted, and somehow softer when he saw me. "You should be asleep," he said quietly. I couldn't. I rose slowly. "Any news?" "Matteo is moving. He wants to negotiate." Livio exhaled, jaw tight. "A trap." "Obviously. But if he believes I'm desperate enough, he'll show himself." He sounded frustrated. No, more than that. Hurt in a way he would never admit. I watched the tension gathered in his shoulders, the stiffness in his movements. This betrayal cut deeper than business. It was personal, family deep, history deep. I stepped closer, my voice softer than I intended. "You don't have to pretend with me." His eyes lifted to mine, and for one fragile second, the walls he kept around everyone else fell away. "I know," he murmured, "and that terrifies me more than Matteo." His fingers brushed a stray curl from my cheek. Not a romantic gesture exactly, but something raw, honest, dangerous. Before I could breathe out a response, a voice crackled through his earpiece. "Boss, they're here." Livio stiffened. "Who?" "Nicholas and the negotiation team. They're waiting in the North Hall." Livio nodded once and turned to leave. Instinctively, I followed. "Hortense," he said sharply, "stay here." I froze only for a heartbeat. "No." His jaw clenched. "This isn't a debate." "I'm coming. You brought me into your strategy for a reason, Livio. You need me." His expression flickered. Annoyance, calculation, a flash of reluctant admiration. Then he exhaled. "Fine. Stay behind me." We moved through the long corridor, the marble floors echoing our footsteps. With every turn, the atmosphere changed, men straightening, hands drifting toward weapons, tension humming like electricity. Nicholas stood in the center of the North Hall, tall and broad-shouldered as always. His trimmed beard framed an expression that gave away nothing. 4 other soldiers stood around him. But something was wrong. Very wrong. The moment I saw Nicholas, my instincts kicked in automatically. A quick swallow, subtle finger twitch, jaw tension, eyes flicking a little too often, toward Livio's back. A pattern I'd seen before, a pattern I couldn't ignore. "Matteo sent terms for negotiation," Nicholas said, handing Livio a folded sheet of paper. Livio opened it slowly. I took a step closer, not to read the note, but to watch Nicholas. His breathing was too shallow, too fast. Panic disguised as professionalism. Wrong. So utterly wrong. "Hortense," Livio murmured. "What do you see?" I didn't answer at first. My eyes locked on Nicholas's right hand, drifting too casually toward his jacket. My stomach dropped. "Gun." "Hortense?" Livio pressed. I swallowed hard, pulse roaring in my ears. "Livio!" My voice was barely audible. "Behind you." He didn't question me. Not for a second. Nicholas moved. Livio moved faster. The world exploded into motion, Nicholas yanking a gun from inside his jacket, aiming straight at Livio's head. Livio shoved me behind him with one swift motion and twisted away. A deafening gunshot shattered the air. I dropped to my knees, hands over my ears, heart pounding so violently I thought it might burst. Livio's guard slammed into Nicholas from the side, but Nicholas was ready, firing wildly, screaming something about Matteo, power, destiny. His eyes were wild, unhinged. Livio surged forward, grabbing Nicholas's wrist, twisting until I heard a sickening crack. The gun flew from his hand and skidded across the marble. Nicholas roared and lunged again. Livio didn't hesitate. One shot, clean, precise, final. Nicholas crumpled to the floor, eyes glassy, chest rising once, then not again. Silence settled over the hall, heavy and suffocating. I pushed myself up, trembling so hard my teeth nearly chattered. Livio strode to me instantly, dropping to one knee, hands framing my face. "Did he hurt you?" I shook my head, breath shaking. "No, but Livio, your own guard. He tried to kill you." Livio closed his eyes, forehead resting against mine for a beat. "I know. That's 2 betrayals," I whispered. "Enzo. Now Nicholas. Someone deeper is pulling strings." "I'm aware." His voice was rough, scraped raw. "Matteo is behind it, but he has help. Someone who knows my routes, my defenses, everything. Someone trying to break you from inside." He nodded once. "Behind him His men dragged Nicholas's body away, their steps echoing down the corridor. I touched Livio's arm gently. You need to rest. What I need? He stopped, looking at me with a heat that stole my breath. What I need is to keep you alive. You are the one thing I cannot lose in this war. My heart slammed against my ribs. Livio. He stood, extended a hand. Come with me. Not an order, a request. I took it. The storm outside grew harsher as we made our way back to the private wing, thunder rumbling through the windows. When we reached my door, he didn't let go of my hand. Hortense, he murmured, you saved me. Again. I just saw the signs. No. His voice lowered. You saw me. You always do. Something in him cracked then. Only a hairline fracture, but enough for me to glimpse the wounded boy beneath the ruthless king. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against mine, breath warm against my lips. If anything happened to you... I pressed a hand to his chest. Nothing will. I'm not leaving. The air between us trembled. He cupped my cheek. I didn't pull away. Our lips met, slow at first, then deeper, fueled by fear, fury, longing, everything we'd held back since that first night under the chandeliers. When we finally parted, breathless, Livio whispered against my skin, this isn't over. Matteo will strike again, and when he does, we strike back. I nodded, because for the first time since I whispered, stay quiet, don't move. I wasn't afraid of Livio's world anymore. I was ready to fight in it. By the time dawn crawled over the horizon, the storm had washed Paris clean and left the world looking deceptively calm. Inside the estate, it felt like the opposite, electric, braced, waiting. Matteo finally made his move at 9:17 a.m. I was in the war room with Livio, watching rainwater streak down the tall windows while his men rotated in and out with updates. Screens glowed with maps of the city, building layouts, surveillance photos. It looked like a crime documentary, except I was inside it. Sophia slid a phone across the table. He called the secondary line. Wouldn't speak to anyone but you. Livio put the phone on speaker, leaned back in his chair and said, Matteo. The voice that answered was smooth, older, with that lazy arrogance of a man who'd lived too long thinking he couldn't be touched. Livio, I was beginning to think you'd forgotten how to bleed. My fingers curled against the edge of the table. You've been reminding me, Livio replied, voice cool. Taking my men, taking my territory, reaching for what is not yours. You took what was mine first. Your father's empire should have been divided, not handed to a boy who didn't understand respect. Matteo exhaled into the mic, a soft, mocking sound. Let's not bore ourselves. You know what I want. You know why I pushed you this far. You've already lost, Livio said. Enzo, Nicholas, your informants, your attempts on Hortense. My name on his lips made something sharp twist in my chest. Matteo laughed, low and amused. Ah, yes. The waitress. The girl who made you weak enough to show your back. A beat. Bring her tonight. Midnight. La Lumière D'Or. We end this where she started it. My spine went cold. And if I don't come? Livio asked. There won't be enough of her left for you to identify. You know how thorough I am. The line went dead. No one spoke for 3 seconds. 4. Then the room erupted. Voices, curses, layered suggestions. You're not going, Livio said finally, looking straight at me. Absolutely not, Marco added. He wants leverage. He wants... I'm going. My voice surprised even me. It came out steady, clean, absolute. Livio's eyes hardened. No, you're not. He chose that restaurant for a reason, I said, ignoring the tremor in my hands. He wants you off balance. He wants to tear apart the place where you survived instead of died. If I'm not there, he'll know you're playing another game, and he'll disappear again. He'll have snipers on the roofs, Marco snapped. Men at every exit. This is suicide. Then don't play his game, I shot back. Use it. You know the layout, Livio, but I know the staff routes, the blind corners, the places cameras don't see. I know how people move in that space when they're scared. You need that. He stared at me so long I could hear my own heartbeat. You are not bait, he said finally, voice low. I'm not bait, I agreed. I'm your advantage. Silence. Then Sophia spoke quietly. She's right. He expects you to bring her because he thinks she's just a weakness. He doesn't understand that she's been reading his men better than anyone. Livio's jaw tensed. The muscle there jumped. For a moment, I thought he'd forbid it anyway and have me locked in a room. Instead, he exhaled slowly through his nose. Fine, he said. You come, but you do exactly what I say. No improvising. No heroics. If I say run, you run. I nodded, even though we both knew I rarely listened when my instincts screamed otherwise. La Lumière D'Or looked different at midnight. No chandeliers glowing softly for happy couples. No clink of cutlery or hum of conversation. The lights were dimmed, turned down to a golden half-shadow. Tables were pushed back slightly from their usual positions, a subtle rearrangement that made my skin crawl. It felt like I was walking into a memory someone else had disturbed. I wore black, simple and clean, the opposite of my usual uniform. Livio walked beside me, suit impeccable, expression carved from ice. His men were already in place, hidden among the darkened booths in the upper balcony near the kitchen entrance. I knew where they were because I'd helped place them. Matteo wanted a stage. We'd given him an arena. The maitre d's podium stood empty. Our footsteps echoed over marble. Center of the room, Livio murmured. He'll want visibility. I nodded. He'll also want you under the biggest chandelier. Symbolic. Power above your head, about to fall. Livio's mouth twitched once, not quite a smile. He always did love drama. We reached the middle of the dining room. I could feel eyes now, hidden behind shadows, behind tinted glass, behind angled mirrors. Show yourself, Livio called out, voice ringing clearly through the hall. Or are you more coward than I remember? A slow clap answered him from the direction of my old section. Matteo stepped into the light like he'd been born on a stage. Silver hair slicked back, tailored charcoal suit, eyes that had once watched Livio grow up. His expression was almost paternal. Figlio mio, he said. You brought her. Good. His gaze slid to me, assessing, amused. Bonsoir, Mademoiselle Larose. You've caused a great deal of trouble for a girl who carries plates. I held his stare, even though my knees wanted to give out. Maybe you should choose safer restaurants. He laughed. Sharp tongue. I see the appeal. His eyes returned to Livio. Did you tell her who I am? What I did for your father? How many bullets I took so you could stand here and pretend you earned this? You were paid well for every bullet, Livio said, and you stopped protecting us the moment you decided you deserved more than you were given. I deserved respect, Matteo snapped. Instead, your father handed the throne to a boy with a conscience, a boy who thinks loyalty is stronger than fear. I was wrong? Livio's voice sharpened. Look at you, running to outsiders, partnering with men who kidnap women, who drag families into wars they didn't start. That is not respect. That is rot. Matteo's eyes darkened. He lifted his hand. Men rose from the shadows on his side, 8, maybe 9, guns drawn, pointed, at us, at the tables, at the balcony. Behind me, I heard Marco's low curse over the small earpiece. "Positions," Livio murmured, barely moving his lips. "Already there," came Vincent's reply. The air tightened, dense, suffocating. "Last chance, Livio," Matteo said. "You step down. You sign over the docks, the warehouses, the South Bank. You give me the girl as proof you understand who commands this city now, and I let you leave breathing." Livio took one step forward. My heart nearly stopped, but he didn't let go of my hand. "If you wanted me to kneel," he said, voice calm, "you shouldn't have come to the place where I learned to stand." Then everything exploded. Gunfire shattered the silence. The chandelier above us swayed, crystals chiming against each other as bullets tore into glass, wood, metal. I dropped instinctively, pulling Livio with me behind an overturned table. "Two on the left balcony," I gasped into the calm, peeking through the slats. "One by the bar. He's moving to flank the kitchen." Shots answered my words as Livio's men adjusted, firing into the positions I'd called. Matteo's soldiers scrambled behind cover, their formation cracking. Matteo moved fast for an older man, weaving between tables, using the chaos to close the distance. He fired twice, one bullet catching the edge of Livio's shoulder, spinning him back. Hot blood splattered across my hand. "Livio!" I grabbed him, dragging him lower behind the bar. "I'm fine," he gritted out, eyes bright with pain and fury. Movement snagged my attention to the right, one of Matteo's men crawling along the floor, gun aimed not at Livio, but at the balcony where Marco was positioned. "3 o'clock low!" I screamed. Marco shifted just in time, the bullet whizzing past where his head had been. His return shot dropped the man instantly. My lungs burned. My ears rang. Smoke and gunpowder thickened the air. Then, suddenly, it thinned. The gunfire slowed. Matteo stood near the center of the room now, jacket torn, breathing hard. Around us, his men were down or pinned. Livio's side held the advantage. "This was never about territory," Livio said, rising from cover, gun lowered but ready. "You wanted a spectacle. You wanted to prove I couldn't protect what's mine." His gaze flicked briefly to me. "Including her." Matteo's lip curled. He drew a knife from the back of his belt, long, slim, familiar. "I taught your father how to use this," he said. "Seems fitting I use it to end his line." He lunged. Livio met him halfway. The world narrowed to the sharp flash of steel, the dull thud of bodies colliding, the harsh sound of their breathing. No more bullets now, just grunts, impact, the ugly intimacy of close-quarter violence. Matteo slashed. Livio twisted, the knife grazing his side. Livio struck back, fist connecting with Matteo's jaw. Blood sprayed, catching the light. I moved without thinking, circling so I could see both their faces, both their feet. Old habits, watching posture, predicting movement, took over. "Left, Livio!" I shouted as Matteo shifted his weight. "He favors his right leg. He's slower pivoting." Livio adjusted mid-swing, exploiting the weakness I'd seen. He kicked Matteo's knee sideways. Something cracked. Matteo stumbled with a strangled sound, falling to one side. Livio wrenched the knife from his hand and, for a heartbeat, hesitated. Not out of mercy, out of respect for the ghost of his father standing somewhere in this room. Matteo spat blood, laughing through his ruined mouth. "You won't do it," he taunted. "You're still that boy who thinks he's better than us. You don't have the—" Livio buried the knife in his chest. Matteo's eyes went wide, then dull, the last word dying on his tongue. Livio held him there for a second, breathing hard, then let him slide to the floor. Silence settled slowly. broken only by the dripping of a shattered wine bottle somewhere behind the bar and the distant wail of sirens drawing closer. "Boss," Marco called from the balcony. "We have to move. Police are 3 minutes out." Livio wiped his bloody hand on his ruined shirt and turned to me. "You hurt?" he asked. I shook my head, feeling every tremor in my bones. "No. You?" He glanced down at his shoulder and sighed, then back at me. "I've been worse." He reached for my hand. "Kitchen," I said automatically. "Service exit. The alley behind Rue des Carmes. Vincent has the car staged." He gave a short nod. Trust absolute. As we slipped through the kitchen, the same stainless steel maze where I'd once just carried plates and refilled wine, I glanced back. La Lumière D'Or lay in ruins. Shattered chandeliers, broken glass, blood smeared across marble. The place where my life had almost ended had just become the place where Livio's war truly ended instead. The back door slammed behind us, cutting off the sirens, the lights, the ghosts. In the alley, rain hit my face like a baptism. Livio squeezed my hand. "It's over," he said. I looked at him, at the man whose world I'd been dragged into and chosen to stay in. "No," I whispered, stepping closer. "It's just beginning." The war ended 3 weeks ago, but the echoes of it still lived in the halls of Livio's estate. Softly at night, in the shift of guards outside my window, in the way Livio checked every lock twice even when he tried to hide it. And yet, peace had settled here too. A strange, powerful kind of peace. The kind I never imagined I would find in a Mafia king's world. I wasn't a guest anymore. Not a hostage. Not just a woman he protected. I was part of it now. My mornings began in the strategy room, papers spread across the ebony table, surveillance images pinned on digital screens, Livio's men waiting quietly for my analysis. They still looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and respect, whispering my name in hallways as if I were some rare creature. "She's the one who saw the betrayal. Twice. She saved him. Twice." But it wasn't their approval that grounded me. It was the work. I had slipped into this role like it had always been waiting for me, profiling recruits, studying micro-expressions, predicting who would fracture under pressure and who would hold the line. It was terrifying how natural it felt. Terrifying and liberating. Sometimes Livio watched me from the corner of the room, arms crossed, expression unreadable. But when our eyes met, the hardness softened. He trusted me, even with the parts of his empire he had never trusted anyone else with. One morning, after a long meeting about restructuring his outer territories, he dismissed the men and waited until we were alone. "You're doing more than my advisors," he said quietly, tapping a finger on one of the files I'd annotated. "You see things before anyone else does." I closed the folder. "I only pay attention." "No." He shook his head. "You understand people. You always have. That is why Matteo lost, and why I didn't." A memory hit. My whisper at La Lumière D'Or, my breath trembling as I leaned close to him for the first time. "Stay quiet. And don't move." "I didn't understand any of this back then," I murmured. "You understood enough to save my life," Livio replied. "That first whisper, it didn't just change my fate. Hortense, it changed me." The words took the air from my lungs. Livio wasn't a man who gave sentiments easily. If anything, they were rarer than peace. I stepped closer, fingertips brushing the back of his hand. He didn't look away. "I changed too," I told him honestly. "I thought I would run the first chance I got. Go home. Pretend none of this ever happened. And now? I exhaled softly. Now I can't imagine going back to the woman who served wine and tried to stay invisible. He studied me the way he had studied enemies, maps, strategies, slow, intense, searching. Then he said the words I knew he'd been holding for days. You don't have to be invisible here. A warmth settled under my ribs, a belonging I had never felt anywhere else. Later that evening, as dusk settled over Paris, he took me to the balcony of the private wing. The sky was streaked with gold and rose, the city glimmering beneath us. From up here, the world felt both vast and small at once, alive, dangerous, beautiful. Livio stood beside me in silence for a while, hands in his pockets, gaze stretched across the horizon. He always seemed less guarded at sunset, maybe because night meant danger, and dusk was the last moment he allowed himself to breathe. "This place suits you," he said finally. I smiled faintly. "The balcony? No." He turned to face me fully. "My world." I swallowed, my heart beating once, hard. I never thought I'd belong in it. And yet, here you are. His voice softened, helping me rebuild everything Matteo tried to destroy, protecting the family I inherited, strengthening the family I'm building. The family he's building. His words lingered, warming me from the inside. "I'm not afraid anymore," I admitted. "Not of the shadows, not of the things people whisper about you, not of the people who once hunted me." I placed my hand on the railing, looking down at the glowing city. I think I was always meant to see the things others miss. I just never knew what to do with it. Livio stepped behind me, not suffocating, not claiming, but there, solid, warm, present. "You know now." I nodded. "Yes." He gently touched my waist, an unspoken acknowledgement of everything we'd survived, everything still to come. "Look at you," he murmured against my temple. "The woman who warned me, who read my enemies better than my own lieutenants, who walked through fire without breaking." I turned to face him fully. "And you?" I said softly, "the man I was supposed to fear, but instead found my future with." His breath caught, just slightly, but enough for me to feel it. "Stay with me," he said. Not a command, not a plea, a truth. "I'm not going anywhere," I whispered. He kissed me then, slow, confident, certain. Not a desperate kiss born of chaos, but one rooted in something deeper, something lasting. When we pulled apart, the lights of Paris shimmered below us like a promise. I stood beside Livio Pugliesi, not as a waitress who stumbled into a storm, not as a frightened woman whispering warnings into a Mafia king's ear, but as the woman who saw betrayal before anyone else did. The woman who changed his fate, and the woman he never expected, but now could never lose. My transformation was complete. And this world, dangerous, dark, powerful, was now mine too.